Zane Smith will officially return to Front Row Motorsports in 2025, and it sounds like LaJoie is no longer the favorite for the 51 car for Ware Racing in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Cookout. As it was announced yesterday, Cookout will be the title sponsor for the Clash at Bowman Gray in 2025. This is definitely an interesting change. Busch has been the main sponsor for the Clash for many, many years. One of the reasons why Cookout has been chosen, though, is because Cookout is from Greensboro, North Carolina, which is not that far away from where the Clash is taking place, which is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's going to be, we're not seeing Busch be like the Busch-like Clash, but I think it makes a lot of sense why they're making this move of Cookout being kind of close to the area. It does make a lot of sense. I know there's definitely some questions about it for sure, but it does make some sense why they decided to change the name up from the Busch-like Clash to the Cookout Clash for 2025. It does make some sense, and I'm not surprised by the move that they're making overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bowman Gray once again. Now, a couple days ago for the end of the year, Bozy Tatarevic, who does a lot of work in NASCAR and, of course, in IMSA as well, was at Bowman Gray looking at some of the safety updates that have been done to the racetrack. Now, obviously, the Clash is about a month away from now, and they need to get the track pretty much done at this point. It looks like the safety barriers are pretty much up. If you actually take a look, the safety barriers have been, of course, used at Los Angeles. They pretty much have brought all the stuff from Los Angeles out to Bowman Gray. The catch fencing is starting to come up, which some people are not a big fan of, but they got to put the catch fencing in there for safety, and I think it makes sense why they did that there. I think it's looking really good in my opinion. I think there's a lot of positivity to say. I'm really intrigued to see how this race is going to go. We're not that far away from the season starting. Nonetheless, it's pretty interesting to see for sure. And I love some of the safety updates they've done. They do look solid in my opinion. And I think there's some good stuff coming from it overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As it was announced on Monday or Tuesday that Kevin Harvick will be running the Cars Tour West race at Kern County in early February. Kevin Harvick did also reveal he's expected to run around 12 to 13 races throughout 2025 and some other races with his son as well. This is really, really good to see. I believe this will be the first time that Kevin Harvick has competed in the Cars Tour West race. Of course, he does own the track of Kern County at this point, which is one of the reasons why he's decided to race this track in the first place. I think Kevin Harvick's going to have a decent chance and opportunity to compete. He was very competitive in the Cars Tour races last year, showed some really great pace and speed, and still proved that at it, even at around the age of 50, he still has got it at this point. He's still a very talented driver. Good to see Kevin Harvick getting the chance and opportunity as he does get prepared to get behind the mic as a commentator for 2025, but it's good to see that Kevin Harvick will be expanding his horizons and doing some Cars Tour racing at Kern County later this year in the 2025 year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, if you watched the high limit race of Perf over the past week for the end of the year, you probably saw the Perf Invitational that took place for the high limit series. Now, the first two nights, James McFadden went on to win both of the events, but coming into night number 3, we knew McFadden was going to be the favorite to go to victory lane. However, we all knew that Kyle Larson, who had been fast throughout the week as well, was going to be a major challenger for the win. And indeed, it was just that. James McFadden dominated the early portion of the race, but Kyle Larson had a fast car at the end, played the lap traffic, got around it. It took the lead with around 5 laps to go in the race, got around McFadden, pulled out the pretty big lead, and would come off the corner and pick up $100,000, the most anyone's ever won, I believe, in Australia in an event, one of the richest wins we've seen for an invitational, and this also is the first time that Kyle Larson has won in Australia as well. Congratulations to Kyle Larson. Of course, now he's competing in the Tulsa Shootout currently at the moment, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I'm glad to see that Kyle Larson got to go race in Perf and win the High Limit Series. I think it's really cool that Larson can go out there and continue to win races and win events on a week-by-week basis, proving why he's one of the best drivers in the world. Congratulations once again, like I said, to Kyle Larson on winning the High Limit race at Perf. A well-deserved win for him, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bobby Labonte. As it was announced yesterday morning that Bobby Labonte will be running the modified race at Bowman Gray on February the 1st. Obviously, the modified series will be competing. I think it's going to be the the Southern Modified Tour, I think, will be competing at the Madhouse on February 1st. I think that's going to be their season opener. And I believe Joe Gibbs Racing, of course, since Bobby Labonte does work at Joe Gibbs Racing now, I believe, as working like in certain department over there, he's helping to try to build Joe Gibbs Racing up in certain areas. But Bobby Labonte has also been competing in modifieds over the course of the last few years since he officially retired from full-time NASCAR Cup racing years ago. But it's good to see that Bobby is going to be competing in this event. I think Bobby does have a decent chance and opportunity, especially with his experience in modifieds, though there's going to be a lot of really great competition. It's unknown at this point, but I'd have to think that Tim Brown, who's the winningest driver, who's also competing in the Clash, by the way, I would think he will also be running this modified race, but I think it's pretty exciting to see that Bobby Labonte will get the chance and opportunity to compete in this event with Cookout as a sponsor, and there's some other stuff revealed which I found to be interesting, but pretty cool nonetheless to see that Bobby Labonte will get the chance and opportunity to run the modified race at Bowman Gray. Really exciting stuff overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Hos Factory Team. As this was reported by Davey Siegel yesterday, but if you actually take a look at the banner on Twitter, Super Hos Racing's logos and all this stuff is starting to transition away, and the Hos Factory Team has now been as the bio. Now, we haven't seen Super Hos Racing header change at this point, but I do expect, especially with the season coming up in about a month or so from now, I would have to think that they're going to get that all changed. Remember, of course, Super Hos Racing no longer exists anymore. All the drivers have moved on from the team. The charters have also all been sold at this point to all the organizations, and we also do know at this point as well that we know that Sam Mayer and Sheldon Creed are going to be teammates against racing together in Xfinity, while Cole Custer, of course, will drive the number 41 in Cup next year. Very interesting move, in my opinion, and glad to see that they've updated their bio. And I have to think a lot more is coming for the team as we get close to the start of 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, it was revealed yesterday by Ryan Williams, there's a lot of designing from Junior Motorsports, that they have officially updated their logo. If you take a look at the new logo that Junior Motorsports has, the old logo had like a white or black banner. If you did the white color on the logo, it would have a black underline. Same with the white one, it would have a white underline. But they've gotten rid of that white underline and simplified the logo a lot. I gotta say, I really love this simplified logo. It's not as cluttered anymore. It's a really good, nice looking logo. And there's a lot of positivity. Look at this. I think it's a really good looking logo. Ryan Williams always does a fantastic job when designing things. This one's no exception. I think it looks amazing. I think it looks really, really fantastic. And I'm definitely excited to see this logo throughout 2025. I think it looks very nice. It looks really great to see. And overall, I think it looks really good to the naked eye. It looks really awesome. Glad to see they've change up the logo for 2025. I think it's a really great change overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen has been competing in Australia over the course of the last couple of days. And before the year ended, I think on December 27th or December 28th, Shane Van Gisbergen had a pretty nasty flip and a couple crashes throughout the last couple of weeks. I believe on December 26th and 27th at Wakina Park, I think it's what they call it, he basically ended up crashing down there and it flipping upside down. He also got involved in another crash, and luckily for Shane Van Gisbergen, he was okay from those wrecks. It is scary seeing someone get involved in a wreck, however, considering the fact that, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen will be racing full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series this year with Trackhouse Racing. But I think getting experience in racing in other series, to get prepared, again, getting behind the wheel of a race car and racing in different series can really get you prepared for the next year. That's why Kyle Larson's been able to be as successful of a race car driver as he's been, because he gets all that experience too. Nonetheless, I'm glad to see that Shane Van Gisbergen's okay. That flip was not really great in my opinion, but glad to see that Shane was okay after the crash. I don't think Shane won a race, unfortunately, over there in Australia, but it's good to see that he is competing in another series nonetheless, and glad to see that he's able to go out there and get that experience that he is going to need, because the more experience you can get, the better of a driver you can become. Glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to race with Trackhouse this year, and good to see that he was okay from the crashes that took place over the last couple days, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cesar Bacarella. As it was announced a couple days ago, that Cesar Bacarella will drive the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing in the season opener at Daytona International Speedway, with I believe Mini Muffins being the sponsor. Cesar Bacarella, for those who do not know, is a co-owner of Alpha Prime Racing. Now, Cesar Bacarella actually had some decent runs last year with Alpha Prime. I think he scored a top 10 or 2 top 10s last year, all, of course, coming on super speedways. Generally, Cesar Bacarella only tends to run a majority of the super speedway races, though I could end up seeing him run some other races throughout 2025. It is certainly possible, but it's also good to see the 45 car will be making a return in 2025. We know the 43 will no longer be a car on the grid in 2025, though they could use it in the future. But I think that Cesar will have a chance and opportunity to make the race. I don't know how many races exactly the 45 car will be on the track throughout 2025, but I have to think this car will be on the track quite a bit, as Cesar, I think, will probably run all the super speedway races. And I have to think some other drivers that might want to get some starts and opportunities could get behind the wheel of this car at some point throughout the year. Nonetheless, glad to see the Caesars getting the chance and opportunity, and I really hope he can be very solid and really competitive when we go to Daytona later this year. Great opportunity for Caesar, in my honest opinion. Really glad to see him get the chance and opportunity to run the Xfinity race with the team in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mason Maggio. As it was announced on New Year's Day that Mason Maggio will in fact join Joey Gase Motorsports in 2025 on a part-time basis. The number of races was not announced exactly how many he will run. It's also unclear what number he is going to be in. We talked about this on the channel for the end of the year, but it was announced that Greg Van also running majority races in the number 35 car in 2025, including at Daytona International Speedway. The big question I have, will Mason Maggio fill up the rest of the races in the number 35 car next year, or this year I should say, or are we going to end up seeing him drive the number 53? Because we do know that there are going to be 2 Joey Gase Motorsports cars in 2025. Mason, in my opinion, though, is one of the more underrated drivers in the sport. He had some really solid runs with Floridian Motorsports, and I think he did a pretty solid job with the program. That team, he actually had some top 25 runs with the organization over Floridian, and especially now with Scott Austin being a co-owner over at Joey Gase Motorsports. That's why I knew this was likely happening when it was announced that Scott was going over there. I'm thinking this is probably where Mason Maggio is going to end up in 2025, and sure enough, I was right. Now, again, I would have to think it's probably like a 10 to 12 race schedule. I would be thinking the rest of the schedule will be announced at a later date. But I'm glad to see the Masons getting the chance and opportunity to race with Joey Gase Motorsports and racing in Xfinity competition, because he did run with this team at least in 2025, I should say. And I think he did, like I said, have some solid and pretty good performances. So a great opportunity for him. Really glad to see him get the chance. And I think, he'll do really good. I think he'll show some solid pace, some really good speed. Looking forward to see what Mason Maggio can do. Let's see how he ends up doing and see if he can perform with Joey Gase Motorsports in NASCAR Xfinity competition in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Tulsa Shootout. Now, every year at the end of 2000, every single year, going in the beginning of the year before the Chili Bowl takes place the next week after that, there's always a Tulsa Shootout that takes place. And there's been a lot of NASCAR drivers that have been down there racing. Among those are Kyle Busch, Sheldon Creed, Kyle Larson, who just came back from Australia, Christopher Bell, Brent Cruz has also been doing some races, and I think he's been winning some events in the Tulsa Shootout as well. There's also been other drivers like Owen Larson and Brexton Busch, who've both been very, very competitive, to the point where Brexton Busch has already qualified for the A-Main on tomorrow, which is really, really exciting. But going through some of the notable drivers that have won, Kyle Larson has been very competitive in every single race he's entered, but he's only won one non-stock A win, I'm pretty sure. So at least he's got himself a victory in 2025 in the Tulsa Shootout, but he hasn't won as many races I think we all kind of were expecting. Sheldon Creed also has picked up a couple heat wins throughout the Tulsa Shootout at this point. I think he's gotten 2 wins and then an A win, I'm pretty sure. So Sheldon Creed should be pretty high up in the points because he hasn't qualified on the pole from the draws. So I have to think that Sheldon Creed probably is in a good position to already lock himself in the A-Main at this point. And then Kyle Busch is the big one here. Kyle Busch, obviously in 2024, did not pick up a win on the NASCAR side, at least in the NASCAR Cup Series, but he actually did win a couple races at Tulsa this time around. He picked up a win on New Year's Eve, I think around 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, got interviewed by the people from ThorSport, and you could tell he was really, really happy about picking up the win. 2024 for Kyle Busch was obviously a disaster season on the NASCAR Cup side, so it's good to see that Kyle Busch is focused. I think him winning and having this confidence will be really good for him. So I think when you have a lot of confidence, it can lead to a lot of momentum. It can lead to a lot of success as well. And because he's also getting prepared for the Chili Bowl. So I think that Kyle Busch does have a great chance there. Overall, the NASCAR drivers down there have been competitive. I don't believe Christopher Bell has won a race at all or even a heat at this point, though I do think that Bell has a really good chance and opportunity. If he can make the A-main, I think he's got a good chance to win. And, of course, a lot of these guys will be competing in the Chili Bowl next week. So I think that's been good to see all the NASCAR drivers go to victory lane, find ways to get up front and contend. Good to see all the people being able to compete. And like I said, congratulations to all the drivers who've been able to win so far. Really good to see that overall. And good to see it for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Bell once again. As it was announced a couple days ago that Christopher Bell has officially announced that he'll be back doing some dirt racing in 2025. He's going to be doing some sprint car racing, I believe, in USAC in 2025 for Creeds Racing. He also will make, I believe, 4 or 5 starts. I think his first start will come at Volusia County, I believe, later this year, I think on February 5th or February the 6th. And Christopher Bell will get the chance and opportunity to do some sprint car racing before the NASCAR season gets kicked off and underway. Christopher Bell, we obviously know, was cleared about a month or so ago because we obviously know Ty Gibbs, who will be running the Chili Bowl in 2025 and running some dirt races. That's one of the reasons why all the drivers at Joe Gibbs Racing, along with the fact that Chase Briscoe is going over there full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing, that's another reason why everything was cleared and why we're seeing drivers like Christopher Bell get the chance and opportunity to go do some dirt racing in 2025. That was a huge story in the early portion of 2023 that Christopher Bell basically said he was not allowed to run dirt, and then there were obviously rumors about him getting not kicked out, but people saying he would leave Joe Gibbs so he could eventually get back to dirt racing, which we all knew really wasn't true. But I'm glad to see that Christopher Bell is getting the chance to do some dirt racing. I think getting behind the wheel of the race car is the most important thing. And if you can get more experience behind the wheel, I don't care what type of car it is, it keeps you focused on the racing side. And I think this is going to make Christopher Bell a much stronger driver this upcoming year. I would expect that Christopher Bell could have a better season in 2025 than he had in 2024. And 2024 for Christopher Bell on the Cup side was honestly really, really good. He was one of the only guys to keep up with Kyle Larson for a majority of the season. He won 3 races. Yes, his last one came in New Hampshire, but he should have won a few races at the end of the year. And Christopher Bell had a really, really solid and showed a lot of confidence throughout 2024 to where I think he will be pretty quick in 2025. I think it's going to be a pretty good year for Christopher Bell. And I'm glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to do some dirt racing again. I think him getting behind the wheel of a race car is the most important thing. Glad to see that Christopher will have the chance and opportunity because, like I said, I do think he will be pretty competitive. I think he'll show some really good pace and speed because of getting that dirt experience. I would not be surprised if he wins some dirt races definitely in 2025 as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rich Lucus. As it was confirmed on New Year's Eve that Rich Lucus will once again be the crew chief for Ben Rhodes in 2025. This also confirms that Ben Rhodes, as expected, will be back with ThorSport Racing for the 2025 season. Now, Rich Lucus and Ben Rhodes have teamed up together in the past. They won a championship together in 2021, and near the end of the year in 2023, after Hailie Deegan and Ben Rhodes swapped crew chiefs near the end of the season, Rich went back to work with Ben Rhodes, and once again, they won the championship in 2023. Now, Ben Rhodes, obviously, is a driver who's had a lot of success in NASCAR truck competition, and Rich Lucus also, I think, is a pretty solid crew chief. Now, that being said, I'm not quite sure how this pairing is going to do in 2025. Will there be a point where we see these two get split up? Because it seems like every other year, these two are getting split up because ThorSport is trying to make changes. Because let's be real and honest, outside of Ty Majeski, ThorSport Racing's really struggled in recent years. Jake Garcia had a terrible season in the number 13 truck, didn't do much better than Hailie Deegan. Matt Crafton, who's around 50 years old at this point, is starting to fall off and take a nosedive performance. Ben Rhodes, who just barely made the playoffs this year, was an afterthought in 2024. And then Ty Majeski, who won the championship, was the only driver who really was a contender week in and week out at ThorSport Racing. ThorSport is a team, in my opinion, that I'm just a little bit worried about going into 2025. 2025. Outside of Ty Majeski, I don't really have the confidence in him that they're going to do great. Now, I do have a little more confidence that Rich is going to be the crew chief for Ben. So I think these two, like I said, have a good working relationship. They've both worked together extremely well. And I think that Ben and Rich will show some good pace and some pretty good speed throughout 2025. The question is, can they keep that speed up and run up front every single week? That is going to be the to-be-determined thing at this point. Nonetheless, so glad to see that they're working together once again in 2025 because I really do believe that these two can have a lot of success. The question is, can they have that sustained success long term where they can be super competitive? That's going to be the tricky thing at this point. But nonetheless, glad to see that everything is set up for them and good to see that Ben Rhodes and Rich Lucas will once again be working together in 2025. Hopefully there's a lot of success for them, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. We'll see how Rich and Ben can do together in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. As it was announced on New Year's Day that Dale Jr. will be running the Cars Tour race at Cordell Speedway as Cordell Speedway will be joining the Cars Tour Series in 2025. Dale Jr. will not have basically the Budweiser colors for the event. Instead, he will have Bass Pro shops. If you take a look at the car that he will be using, it will be a white car with the Bass Pro background on it. It will be, I believe, run on April 12th or April 13th later this year. Now, obviously, we've been hearing rumors of Cordell Speedway making a comeback for the Cars Tour. We've been hearing that this likely was going to happen. I think it was confirmed about a year ago or about 2 or 3 months ago, this was likely going to be announced, and now it's officially confirmed that Cordell Speedway is going to be coming back. Dale Jr. has been working, I believe, with the track to get that track restored and ready to go. I think Dale Jr. raced there a lot as a kid, which is one of the reasons why he's coming back to race at Cordell Speedway. But it's also pretty fun that Jr. is coming back and continuing to do some racing. When Dale Jr. races, whether it's a Cars Tour event, whether it's a NASCAR Xfinity Series event, those races tend to get major viewership numbers. I mean, the Flow Racing account basically had issues keeping up with the bandwidth last year because Dale Jr. was racing and people were trying to tune in, and the bandwidth could not be handled because of that. I think Dale Jr. will be pretty competitive. There's going to be a lot of really great talent in that series, including his new driver, Connor Hall, who will be full-time with the Junior Motorsports late model program in 2025. And I think that Dale Jr. will be pretty competitive, and I think, especially if what he showed last year, and how good he was at times, and he actually showed some decent speed, I think Junior could honestly have a chance and opportunity to get himself a late model win in 2025. Again, a really great opportunity for Junior. Junior, of course, has a lot of history at these tracks. I think Dale Jr. will be fast. I think he definitely will be very, very competitive. And I'm glad to see that Dale Jr. is going to run some more races because I think because Dale Jr. being out on the track is really fun. Yes, I know Dale Jr. is starting to get a little bit older at this point, but I think for Dale Jr., if he's having fun with what he's doing, he should be allowed to do it. Glad to see that Dale will get the chance and get the opportunity to race at Cordell Speedway later this year and get the opportunity to race there in April later in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about streaming. As it was reported by jski.com a couple days ago that roughly 50% of the content seen from the sanctioning body's new TV deal, which will go into place starting this year, will be seen from the new NASCAR Productions building in 2025. Now, obviously, we have a new TV deal that is beginning for 2025. Fox will have basically the first 12 to 13 races, and basically they will only show a little bit of practice and qualifying. Then Amazon will be coming into play for 5 races, and then TNT will be on the schedule for 5 races, and then after that, NBC will close out the remainder of 2025. Now, obviously, streaming is becoming a big thing across the world. It's not just a NASCAR thing, but obviously having the new NASCAR Productions facility come into play does make a lot of sense. And from what I understand, pretty much every single Xfinity Series broadcast, if not all of them, are going to be bare from the new NASCAR Productions facility. Now, it's unknown at this point if they're going to have the broadcasters at the racetrack for 2025 or if they're basically going to do what they've done with the Truck Series commentary, which, let's be real and honest, I'm not a big fan of remote moves. I think you should be at the racetrack if you're going to be broadcasting an event. That's just my opinion, though. But I think streaming is going to become very, very important. I mean, for the first time, NASCAR Cup races are going to be streamed exclusively on Amazon. Streaming is growing in the country, and people want to find a way to save money too at this point. And I think that's cool that they're doing that. Now, obviously, I think some people will question the NASCAR Productions facility. I don't want to see races, like I said, broadcasted from there. But then again, if they do it, it is what it is at this point. Nonetheless, it's very interesting for sure, something to keep an eye on throughout the year, and we'll see how things end up going. But it's interesting now that a lot of the content will be streamed, and a lot of the content there, because they're really upping the production. Some of the video teasers they've been putting out on Twitter have been really cool. Glad to see the productions facility will be starting to get into use for 2025. Really interesting and exciting stuff in a way. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. As there was revealed before the end of the year that Junior Motorsports, while they have not officially announced, it's been kind of revealed to some of the crew chiefs are going to be for some of the drivers at Junior Motorsports in 2025. First, let's begin by talking about Carson Quaffle. This is who revealed the information about the crew chiefs for 2025. Andrew Overstreet, who crew chiefed the number 88 car for a majority of his season in 2025, including 24, including a lot of races with Carson Quaffle, will be Carson Quaffle's crew chief in 2025. While Marty Lindley, who crew chiefed the number 1 car for Sam Mayer in 2024, will be Connor Zilich's crew chief in 2025. Let's first begin with the duo of Carson Quaffle and Andrew Overstreet. These two had a lot of success in 2024. Carson Quaffle was able to, while he didn't win a race at the beginning of their tenure, they showed a lot of really great pace and speed. They almost won at Dover, and they almost won at Martinsville as well, as they finished in the top 5 in the first 2 races. And I think that Andrew Overstreet and Carson Quaffle, especially of how good of a driver Carson is at the short tracks, I think Carson will definitely be one of the favorites to win at the short tracks in 2025. I think these two are going to work extremely well together in 2025. As for the other pairing of Marty Lindley and Connor Zilich, these two I think are going to massively gel. Marty Lindley and Sam Mayer, they had a lot of success together, right? They were very, very quick. We saw Marty Lindley get 3 wins with Sam Mayer in 2024. And I think objectively, when you look at talent, I think Connor Zilich is a more talented driver than Sam Mayer, especially at a road course where Sam Mayer was extremely good at road courses, where a majority of his wins, I think 4 of the 7 he's had up to this point, have come at road courses. And you've got Connor Zilich, who is objectively the favorite to win pretty much every single road course race in 2025 at the moment. I think that these two are going to gel so well together, and I think this could be the team, the number 88 team. I think will be the favorite organization to win the championship in 2025. I think for Carson Quaffle and Andrew, I think there's going to be a win or 2 that will come from this year. I think a win or 2 is definitely very possible for Carson with how much potential he showed. As for Connor Zilich and, of course, Marty Lindley, I think there's at least 3 to 4 wins minimum for the team. While I also think there's a really good chance you could have as high as a 7 to 8 win season. We haven't seen a driver since John Hunter a couple years ago win 7 or 8 races. I think Connor Zilich has a really great chance and opportunity to do that, because Connor Zilich showed some really great pace and some really good flair in the 4 races he ran. Of course, he did win his Xfinity Series debut at Watkins Glen, but got 2 other top 5 finishes, including a 4th place finish at Kansas, despite the fact he was yawing at that wheel and was sideways across and was very competitive in that event. To me, I really, really like these crew chiefs for next year. We don't know who the crew chiefs officially are. For Sammy Smith, we think it might be Adam Wall, but we're not entirely sure. We also are expecting, once again, that Jim Pullman, who worked with Justin Allgaier the last couple of years, will once again be the crew chief for Justin Allgaier, which does make a lot of sense. So good to see that everything's been revealed on that front, and glad to see the crew chiefs are finally coming out and getting announced. Glad to see that everything's been revealed on that front for 2025. Glad to see it's been revealed, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mike Wallace. As it was shockingly announced yesterday that Mike Wallace will be attempting to run the 2025 Daytona 500, driving a number 66 car for NBM Motorsports. NBM Motorsports had put out a teaser, of course, a couple days ago. They were going to be announcing their 2025 Daytona 500 driver. And when it was kind of revealed that this was going to happen, many people like myself were speculating it was maybe going to be someone like a Timmy Hill, or maybe a Garrett Smithley, or maybe somehow shockingly Mark Truex Jr., even though they're going to be Ford. I would have never thought that Mike Wallace, of all people, was going to be the driver. The last time that Mike Wallace competed in a NASCAR sanctioned event was 2020 when he ran the Daytona Road Course race in the UNOH 188. The last time he ran a NASCAR Cup Series race was 2015 in the Daytona 500. Now, Mike Wallace is a formidable super speedway racer. He has won in all three series of super speedways. He won 2011, which is the most recent win at Talladega in the number 33 truck for Kevin Harvick Incorporated. His last Xfinity win came in 2004 at Daytona, driving the number 4 for Fred Biaggi's team. And then, of course, he has not won a Cup race at this point, but he's been pretty competitive there and has also shown some good speed at super speedways over the years as well. I think he's also won an ARCA race at Daytona as well, and he's also won the truck race in 2000, driving number 2 for Ultra Motorsports. Now, Mike Wallace, I think there definitely will be some questions about this move. I think it's a very interesting move, to say the least. Now, that being said, I do think that, yes, it's really cool to see that Mike Wallace is going to be coming out of retirement and running the event. I think there definitely need to be some questions about it. Mike Wallace is 65 years old, will be 66 this year, and for someone that has not been competitive and has not competed in NASCAR's divisions in 4 years and has not competed on a Cup level since 2015, I do think there need to be some questions asked because, only 11 current Cup drivers have raced against Mike Wallace. Kyle Larson has, for sure. I know Larson racer, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Ryan Preece made his Cup debut, but most of the guys in the Cup Series had not made their debut at that point. So most of the drivers in the field don't have experience, so I do think a few guys have some from Xfinity. I think Eric Jones does a little bit. We know Kyle Busch obviously does. There's some other drivers like Chris Buescher and Bubba Wallace have competed against Mike Wallace, but I do think that Mike Wallace coming in and running the 500 is going to be interesting. Now, Mike is a decent super speedway racer. The question will be, can they make the show? That's going to be the question, right? Because we don't fully know at this point what the official lineup is going to be for the Daytona 500. We do know there's going to be some extra cars showing up. There could be a 42311 racing car. Probably maybe it could be for Martin Truex Jr., Carlos Kurt Busch, Eric Roll maybe, or some other drivers. We don't know at this point. But I think it is interesting that Mike is going to be there. I think there is an outside chance that he could definitely make the show. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility of happening. But I do worry that if he gets in a wreck, something could happen. I'm not sure. But I'm not exactly sure if he's going to be super competitive. But then again, you never know, right? Like I said, Mike Wallace is a solid super speedway racer. He was really good at super speedways back in the day. And I think it's an interesting move to see him come out of retirement and race in the Daytona 500. We'll see how he ends up doing. We'll see if he can perform in 2025. And we'll see if he can show some really great pace and some really strong speed with the team in 2025. We'll see if he can make the Daytona 500 in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Cope Racing family team. As it was shockingly announced yesterday, the Cope Racing family team will officially be joining the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025, as this will be a new venture for Derek Cope going into 2025. The number they're going to use is the number 70, which is very synonymous with Derek Cope in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition in the early to mid-2010s. They will have an alliance with Rich Schultz Racing, and they will have ECR engines in 2025. The two drivers they'll have are going to be Thomas Annunziata and Leland Honeyman Jr. Leland Honeyman Jr. will make his debut at Daytona International Speedway, while Thomas Annunziata will make his debut at Circuit Americas in the number 70 car. There were rumors and speculation that this team was potentially going to be showing up for the 2025 season, but I didn't really believe it at the time. And the initial rumors I heard was that Nick Tucker, who's done some work in the Truck Series back in the day, was going to be the driver for this car because Nick Tucker has driven for Derek Cope's Trans Am team. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, Derek Cope has been fully focused on the Trans Am series, being an owner in that series and not being a race car driver. Now he's coming out of retirement and back into NASCAR and racing in Xfinity competition, because the last time we saw Derek Cope in NASCAR was all the way back in 2021 when Starcom Racing was around, and of course he did run the Daytona 500 that year in 2021, where he's taken out on lap 3 of the race and the event. Now, looking at this team overall as a whole, this team is very, very interesting. You've got two very young, very unproven, but very talented race car drivers. Liane Honeyman last year of Young's Motorsports showed some really good pace and really good speed and was actually up front in a couple events throughout 2024. And Leland showed a lot of potential and some pretty good promise as well. As for Thomas Annunziata, he comes from the Trans Am side, and honestly, he showed some really good flair in Xfinity competition, the race that he got to run in 2024. He made a couple races with JD Motorsports for that team. Unfortunately, he went up in smoke, and overall, they showed some really good promise at times. Yes, he failed to qualify for Chicago, but he did have some good runs in Xfinity competition last year. For this team, I think there's definitely some promise for sure. Now, what is the goal for this team in 2025? Number one, I think the goal is to get as many top 20 finishes as possible. I think that should be the goal for a new team, and try to finish in that top 20 to top 25 in the standings, because you've got a lot of really good competition in Xfinity this year. You've obviously got people like Connor Zilish, Carson Quaffler going to be competing for championships. Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, same thing. You're going to have Matt DiBenedetto, who's probably going to be in that middle pack group. You're going to have the RSS racing cars are going to be pretty fast this year. You've got the JGR drivers of Williams Sawalich, and of course Taylor Gray and Brandon Jones. You've got Christian Neckes joining this series. You've got a really strong group of drivers in 2025. And going back to another driver, we thought Liane Honeyman was going to be the driver of one of these cars at Young's Motorsports. It sounds like Anthony Alfredo's a favorite for the 42 car currently at the moment right now. That probably could be announced in the coming days. We're not sure. But I'm glad to see the Cope Racing family is going to be showing up. Pretty exciting stuff. Hope this team can be competitive and show some really good speed and some really good pace throughout 2025. We'll see how they end up doing. Good to see a new team showing up on the track in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about artificial intelligence. As it was reported by Adam Stern right before the end of the year, the NASCAR is evaluating how it can use generative AI for competition matters such as playoff format changes. We talked about this on the channel, of course, and I got very, very heated, and I didn't do a really good job explaining myself throughout that. But then it continued on Sunday as a retraction statement would come out from NASCAR. Even though NASCAR may be still looking at AI or generative AI, they still plan to involve humans in this. Now, when I saw this report come out from Adam Stern, I was not a very happy camper. First of all, especially after NASCAR, not even a month or so ago, called NASCAR fans bots, I feel like this is a very, very tone-deaf approach by NASCAR. Now, obviously, most employers and most people are using artificial intelligence in some way, shape, or form in most things at the moment. They're using that as like a buzzword, and they're using it. But personally, and I'm glad to see at least NASCAR isn't going to be going away from the human element, it looks like. But I'm glad to see they're not fully going to be using it, just they might just use it as a tool. But personally, I think before you start using AI as a tool, because tools can be used for good things or not, I think you need to be looking at the humans that are involved in it. And humans play a major role in AI. Let's say that artificial intelligence says something that NASCAR doesn't like. Will NASCAR continue using artificial intelligence, or are they not going to continue using artificial intelligence? That's one of the things that I feel like that needs to be said, is that you have to have humans involved when it comes to AI, and AI can only be used for so much. There has to be human involvement in that stuff, like ChatGPT and all that stuff. I think when it comes to the playoff format competition changes, you don't need artificial intelligence for that. You've got people in the industry that know what they're talking about, who know what is the best for the sport currently at the moment right now. You don't need artificial intelligence. That's why there was so much frustration from the fan base and so much frustration for many of the people in the media who feel like they've been trying to get at NASCAR to make the right changes, but they haven't been doing that. Now, obviously, we don't exactly know what the playoff format is going to look like for 2025. There is talk that there might be some slight modifications to it for 2025, maybe a limit on the number of people that get into the playoffs or that kind of stuff, or whatever they're going to decide to do. We're not sure, but it sounds like there could be changes of playoffs for 2025. But like I said, I don't think artificial intelligence should be the way to go. I don't think it'd be the best decision for the sport if they went with an AI way. I think they don't need to go that direction, in my opinion. I understand why they would go the AI direction, but at the same time, I don't think the AI should be the way to go when it comes to making decisions for the sport overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. Now, there was a report that came out from jski.com a couple days ago surrounding the Chicago Street Course future. They wrote an article up on it, and these also comes from Sports Business Journal as well, as there are some questions around the Chicago Street Course's future after 2025. Now, obviously, the Chicago Street Course will be around for 2025 and 2023 in the NASCAR Cup Series. We saw Shane Van Gisbergen win in his Cup Series debut in Chicago. And then 2024, we saw kind of a mess of a race with Alex Bowman going to victory lane. And there were a lot of frustrated fans like myself who were very frustrated about the event. Now, this time around, they've learned from their mistakes a little bit, and they're starting the race a lot earlier. The weather definitely hopefully will be better this time around, and third time will be the charm. At least they got the concerts in this time, and we saw ourselves a really fantastic and really great NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the track. But it's unknown at this point if this track will be coming back for 2026, and it sounds like from what a lot of reports are coming out, I don't know if it's very likely that it is going to happen. So the big question now comes around with the future of Chicago. There is a lot of talk that they could also sign a contract extension for 2 more years. They have a 2-year extension that could come into play through 2027. But over the last couple months, there has also been a ton of chatter surrounding the fact that Chicago, they may rotate where the street race goes into play. Now, obviously, when people saw Chicago being potentially off the schedule, you saw a lot of people who are fans of Road America. Yes, I'm a fan of Road America myself, who were basically wanting Road America to come back over like another street course race or bring back Chicago and Speedway. Now, don't get me wrong. I think going back to Road America makes a lot of sense. Road America would be a really great track to go to. Racing wasn't amazing in the Cup Series there, but Xfinity usually put on a really, really great show. And Chicagoland would work extremely well wonders for a next-gen race. I think the Xfinity Series also, and the Truck Series too, would put on really great racing at Chicagoland at this point. But NASCAR is probably still going to want to continue doing the street course races. So as much as I'd love to see Road America come on back on the schedule or some other races come back on the schedule, I don't think they're going to go away from that. My prediction right now is that they're going to move the street course race to San Diego. We have heard, and we talked about this on the channel a couple weeks ago, but we've been hearing a lot of chatter that there's a really great chance and possibility that they're going to replace the Chicago street course date with another street race. And it sounds like San Diego is the favorite landing spot. Now, there has been talk about other cities potentially hosting a street course day. There was talk, obviously, of Baltimore, I think, being a city. I did see Pittsburgh mentioned. There's talk about maybe Toronto down the road being one. I did see Cincinnati mentioned with the Fifth Third Bank connection. There was a lot of talk about that. I think San Diego, though, is the most likely landing spot for the street course race in 2026. I'm just going to be real and honest. I think that's the most likely landing spot for the race in 2026 at this point. I don't think they're going back to Chicago in 2026 for the street course. Now, is it possible that Chicago makes a comeback in 2026? I think there's definitely a really strong possibility on that. I just think right now at this moment, when we're looking at favorites for the landing spot for the street course day, I think San Diego is the most likely landing spot for the street course race in 2026. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to what happens there, but I'm glad to see that there's talk about it. I'd love to see Chicago come back in 26, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen, and whatever track does end up getting the street course date or whatever ends up replacing it, hope it's a really good track and a really good facility for 2025, in my opinion. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about silly season. Now, over the course of the last couple days and the last week, there's been some very interesting stories in regards to silly season that have not been talked about too much over the course of the last couple days. And Matt Weaver and Bob Pockets wrote some very interesting articles around that. It comes first from Matt Weaver's top 50 memorable articles and moments of 2024. First, let's talk about Corey Day. According to what Matt Weaver is reporting, it sounds like Corey Day could potentially be full-time in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition in 2025, or could be by 2026. Now, Corey Day obviously made his NASCAR Truck Series debut in 2024, made some select starts, had some okay performances, but really did not set the world on fire in those select starts. Also ran a couple select ARCA starts as well. Did have a couple pretty strong runs in ARCA, was running in second position to Salem before getting taken out in a crash that he kind of caused, unfortunately making a mistake off the corner. But But Corey Day is someone who has a lot of talent. Now, there's obviously been rumors of the number 17 Hendrick car could be making a comeback in 2025. So if he does go full-time, that could be where he ends up next year. But I also could potentially see him in maybe Junior Motorsports car, a JRM car split between the 17 and 5th JRM car. That is certainly possible. I could also see him end up in a different car for 2025. That is certainly possible too. But Corey Day may end up being full-time in Xfinity in 2025. Next, let's talk about Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. we know will not be running full-time in NASCAR Cup competition in 2025, though we are looking to see, and we're expecting Martin Truex Jr. to run the Daytona 500 in 2025. There have been rumors about a fourth 2311 racing car being out there, with Cole Purr being the crew chief. However, things have transitioned, maybe going over to Legacy, because we're not sure if 2311 is going to run a fourth car in the Daytona 500. So if Martin Truex Jr. does, in fact, run the Daytona 500, it probably will either be with Legacy or 2311. We're not quite sure at this point. But Martin Truex Jr. is still expected to run the 2025 Daytona 500. Moving on to Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch obviously is going to be one of the big talking points in the silly season in 2025, because Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Richard Childress Racing. We discussed it on the channel about a week or so ago, about 2 weeks ago, that he will potentially be a free agent at the end of the year. If Kyle Busch really struggles at Richard Childress Racing in 2025, I could see Kyle Busch deciding to leave RCR or just retiring altogether. I think we're going to be in a very similar situation with Kyle Busch as we were in 2022, because we're not sure if Kyle Busch will be back with RCR in 2025. And finally, let's talk about Aric Almirola. Aric Almirola is another driver that we do not know at this point what he's doing for 2025 at the time. This comes after the Bubba Wallace and Aric Almirola part of that article, where Bubba Wallace and Aric Almirola got into a fight/shoving match in a competition meeting, and a lot of people are speculating that Almirola might just retire altogether at the end of the year. I think Aric Almirola could make a comeback part-time with Joe Gibbs Racing. We still have not had any official confirmation on the All-Star car for JGR at this time yet for 2025. But Aric Almirola also could make a comeback and could also retire at the end of the year. But I think Aric Almirola, if he ever wanted to come back and run full-time in Xfinity with Joe Gibbs Racing, I genuinely think he could be very, very competitive. In 2024, he picked up 3 victories, including sweeping Martinsville, and was very, very strong and super fast and super, super quick. So I think Almirola will show some good pace and speed if he got the opportunity. There's some other silly season stories out there, like Anthony Alfredo sounds like he's probably going to Young's Motorsports in 25. We're still waiting on Hettinger Racing on what they're doing at this time for 25. If I was them, I'd put Brett Moffitt behind the wheel. There's still RSS Racing waiting on what they're going to do, the rest of the ThorSport lineup, the rest of the Spire lineup. But most of the NASCAR silly season stories are starting to kind of come to a close at this point, and we should know most of the rest of the remaining silly season stories in the coming weeks on here. Probably for the start of the season, we should know everything around silly season for 2025. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, we did a video covering this on the channel yesterday, but it was officially confirmed that Zane Smith will join Ware Motorsports in the Cup Series in 2025, or return to Front Row in 2025, driving a number 30A car. This has been the worst kept secret in the garage over the course of the last few months. Remember, it was expected he would not be returning to the Trackhouse Racing family for 2025 back in July, and was confirmed during Daytona week that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to get the 3rd Trackhouse Racing seat for 2025, and Zane Smith would not be part of the family for 2025, which at the time made a lot of sense. Look, when it comes to who I think's got the best chance of winning between Zane Smith and Shane Van Gisbergen, Shane is going to give you a better chance and opportunity of winning at the moment, especially at a road course, while Zane might give you a chance at an oval. But I think, especially how many road courses there are, Shane made a lot of sense to go with. Then there was a lot of speculation about where Zane was going. There was talk about McAnally Hogeman Racing being a potential possibility, but then everything started leaning toward him going back to Front Row in 2025. His crew chief for 2025 is going to be Ryan Burgundy, who was a crew chief of this car for Todd Gillen in 2025. I did see some people questioning why they moved Todd Gillen into 34 when they could have kept him in 38 and moved Zane into 34 perhaps. Well, one of the reasons why they moved Todd Gillen in the 34 car is because Todd Gillen is the veteran on the Cup side. Zane Smith hasn't ran a lot in Cup with the team, which is one of the reasons why they moved him over. But going back and talking about Zane Smith, Zane Smith is going to be with the team that he's driven for in the past. He, of course, drove for them in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2022, and Zane Smith did go on to win the Truck Series title. And also, Zane Smith was super, super fast and very competitive in truck competition for those 2 years. And also made a couple select cup starts with Front Row, had some decent runs, including a top 10 in the Coca-Cola 600. But then in 2024, he, of course, then moved over to Trackhouse Racing Family. It was kind of a mix of two teams between Spire and Trackhouse. It just never really was going to work together with what they were doing over there. Now Zane's getting the chance and opportunity to head over to Front Row. So what are the expectations for Zane Smith in 2025? I think Zane Smith, realistically, the goal should be is to contend for top 25 in the standings or even top 20 in the standings at this point, and maybe find a way or an outside opportunity to get a chance to make the playoffs. But I look at the competition that Zane is going to have in 2025, and Zane is going to have a lot of tough competition this upcoming year. There's no denying that. The field is really stacked this year. You've got a lot of really strong teams. But looking at Front Row has a very strong and really great lineup. You obviously got Noah Gragson, which was confirmed today that Noah Gragson will drive the number 4. Did a video on that earlier this morning. Obviously, we know Todd Gilliland will be into 34, and then Zane Smith into 38. All three of these drivers on the Cup lineup are super talented, super, super strong, all have potential to grow and develop, and all have potential maybe down the road to be Cup champions. I'm not expecting Front Row to be championship contenders this year. I think we should all be realistic. The goal is to try to make the playoffs. That should be the ultimate goal this year, have a car in the playoffs, which I'm leaning toward Todd Gilliland, him working with Chris Lawson. I'm leaning toward those two gelling together and potentially getting Todd in the playoffs. But I also think there's a chance that Zane and Noah could win a race. You never know at this point. I think the really interesting battle, Eric Issa brought this up on his channel, but I think the interesting battle is going to be between Front Row and Spire. These are two teams that are really, really growing. They're both going to have Tier 1 support most likely next year. We already knew the Front Row does, but we're expecting that Spire, especially with their connection with Hendrick and Chevrolet, that they're going to have a bigger alliance. They've got young talent, but also Front Row does have a younger pool. And you've also got their truck lineup as well, right? Chandler Smith and, of course, Lane Riggs are two really good young drivers as well, who I think are going to do exceptional with that team in 2025. I think Front Row is setting themselves up for a really good future. Now, obviously, the lawsuit is going to be something to watch, right? We know that there's potential possibility that somehow if NASCAR wins their appeal, that the lawsuit might come into play. But sidetracking from that, I think Front Row is in a really good position long term. This is a team that I think by the end of the decade will be championship contenders. They're building themselves up for the long term. They're looking really, really strong. And I do think that Zane Smith is going to be a very solid threat and a pretty big contender in 2025. I think it's going to be a fun year for Zane. I think a lot of Zane Smith fans should be happy right now that he's getting the chance and opportunity. And Front Row inevitably got what they want. They got 3 really good young talents. And I think, especially with the average age of their Cup lineup being like 24, 25, one of the youngest lineups we have seen, I think it's going to be a fun year to see how this team performs, and we'll see how Zane Smith does, but glad to see that Zane Smith finally has got it announced that he'll be going to Front Row Motorsports full-time in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware. Now, there's been a lot of talk about who is going to get behind the wheel of the number 51 car for Ware Racing in 2025. And currently at the moment it is coming down between Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware on who could get the number 51 car. Now, up until a couple days ago, it sounded like Corey LaJoie was going to be the front runner for the number 51 car in 2025. However, over the course of the last couple days, things have been changing really quickly. According to Jordan Bianchi and Bob Pockers, it sounds like Corey LaJoie is no longer the favorite to drive the number 51 car for Ware Racing in 2025. It sounds like Cody Ware, who of course is the son of Rick Ware, is the current favorite to drive the number 51 car for Ware Racing in 2025. Now, I completely understand why they're making this move. Cody Ware is the son of Rick Ware, and Cody, of course, wanted to get back to being full-time in NASCAR Cup competition. But when I'm looking at both drivers compared, right, between Cody Ware and Corey LaJoie, I think that Corey LaJoie is overall a much better driver than Cody Ware. Yes, let's be real and honest. 2024 was a complete disaster for Corey LaJoie. He had an overall bad season, which is a shame because back in 2023, Corey LaJoie didn't have a single DNF, the only driver that didn't have a DNF. To go from having 0 DNFs in 2023 to having, I think, the most CNS of any driver in 2024 up there for sure, and just not running really well and getting outperformed by his teammates on a week-by-week basis, two of those being rookies nonetheless, and just not performing very, very well when Spire's growing. I think the pressure really got to Corey LaJoie. And then Corey LaJoie also had the issue of not really taking a lot of responsibility. He didn't take responsibility for what happened at Pocono between him and Kyle Busch. He kept wrecking people on the racetrack, and people in the garage got really frustrated. But I do think there's another reason why Corey LaJoie is not getting this seat, unfortunately, at this time. Obviously, I think a lot of it has to do with Tommy Baldwin. Apparently, from what I know, Corey LaJoie had kind of wrecked Jimmy Bula, who I think was driving for Tommy Baldwin at the time in 2022. And Tommy Baldwin is the competition director at Ware Racing. Probably one of the reasons why he's not going to be in that 51 car next year. Now, I wish that some of these people could hold their grudges and not keep holding grudges and all that stuff, because I think that Corey LaJoie would be a better driver fit. Corey LaJoie near the end of this year, actually, despite the fact that, yes, the first half of the year was a complete disaster, Corey LaJoie actually did have a solid end of the year. He had some top 20 runs. Yes, the last 3 races weren't good for Corey LaJoie, but he had some top 15 runs at the end of the year. Now, obviously, people are going to look at the average finish and say, well, Daniel, Corey LaJoie and Cody Ware, you compare their average finishes, that Cody Ware had a better average finish. And yeah, that's definitely true. Cody Ware had, I think, a 19.5 or 19.6 average compared to Corey LaJoie, who had like a 21st or 22nd average or something like that. But Cody Ware didn't even run the whole entire season. He only ran part of the year. Again, Cody Ware had 2 top 10s this year, which is about how many that Corey LaJoie had this year, but at least Corey LaJoie got a top 5, I think, at a non-super speedway, or top 10 in non-super speedway this year, so that was a pretty big accomplishment for him. For Corey LaJoie, I think if he isn't going back to Ware, I think he's at a crossroads at this point. I really don't know what he does for 2025, because most of the good Cup rides are basically announced at this time for 2025. Obviously, the 51 is no longer an option. I mean, if the 15 may be an option, sure, he could stay part-time at Ware, because he says he'd be running the Daytona 500, so maybe he's in the 15 car, but maybe he's going somewhere else. Maybe Team Ambervent in the 50 car could be a potential possibility at this point. Maybe there's some teams in Xfinity out there. Young's has not announced their driver yet for 25, but like I've already mentioned, I think Anthony Alfredo is getting that seat at this point. There obviously is some other good teams. He's obviously not going to run the Spire truck. Maybe the 4th Nice truck if Bailey Curry somehow doesn't find a way back. I'm not sure, but I don't think Bailey Curry is going to be leaving the team at this point. Maybe, who knows? And then obviously there's some other rides out there. Hettinger Racing hasn't announced their driver yet for 25, but I'm thinking Brett Moffitt's probably going to be the driver in that truck next year. That's what I'm thinking. That's not what I'm saying. I think that might happen. I think the number of rides are drying up really quickly for Corey LaJoie, and there's not a lot of really good options out there. He has also said that he could go toward the media route and just focus on stacking pennies. And there's nothing wrong with that if he doesn't want to run full-time and just do a part-time Cup career while focusing on the media side of things, kind of do something that Parker Kligerman is doing at the moment right now. I think that definitely makes a lot of sense, definitely, for sure. Corey LaJoie, I think, is not an awful race car driver, though, as some say he is. Yes, 2024, like I said, was a complete disaster for Corey LaJoie, and he deserved a lot of the criticism and the flack that he got. But that being said, Corey LaJoie is not the worst NASCAR driver of all time. He's not even in the top 10 worst NASCAR drivers of all time. Corey LaJoie has talent, and it's a shame to see someone who has talent not racing next year in 2025 full-time, most likely. That being said, I think a lot of stuff happened this year that really played a role in that. I think basically him not taking accountability throughout the year really affected his chance to get a top-tier seat. I don't know where he goes next year at this point, though. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Corey LaJoie for 2025, but it does not sound like he'll be full-time in 2025, which is unfortunate, but it's not the most shocking thing or surprising thing at this point. We'll have to see where Corey LaJoie does truly end up going in 2025. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, and if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Corey LaJoie will have a seat in 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think Zane Smith will do at front row? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any other major news that does break throughout the day, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, you will we'll be seeing the Truck Series winner predictions on the channel. Sunday, we'll be taking an early dive look into the 2025 Chili Bowl entry list, and we'll have some other content dropping on people like Kyle Busch, Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Bubba Wallace, all that kind of stuff, and Connor Zilic and Junior Motorsports on the channel throughout the rest of the offseason. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.